Hello, everyone, and welcome back to People Jew Wanna Know podcast. Today, I'm interviewing a multidimensional guest and a friend from the Jinsta, Jewish Insta world, Benji Rosenzweig. How do I even describe Benji? He truly wears so many hats. He is a proud Jewish atheist, a special needs dad advocate, a TEDx speaker, a commercial real estate professional, and a sobriety advocate. He is also the founder of Storied, a Jewish education and empowerment movement focused on celebrating Jewish joy, creativity, and cultural contribution. So, what Stories does is it produces live concerts, podcasts, and classroom programs that explore the Jewish collaborations and contributions behind the legendary bands, genres, and musical movements. Each live show combines storytelling with a full band performance of the music being discussed, creating an immersive and accessible learning experience. At its core, Storied strengthens Jewish identity and combats anti Semitism through joyful, inclusive, and culturally resonant content. By using storytelling, performance, and nostalgic music, Storied offers the next generation a tangible sense of Jewish pride, while reminding non Jewish audiences of the long history of Jewish creativity, collaboration, and influence. I know New York City is known for like side hustles and side hustle culture, but I think Benji out there in Detroit has one on us when it comes to side hustles. This episode has a lot going on. I won't give you too many spoilers, but we basically touch on a little bit of everything with Benji. What I want you to really hear from this conversation is the vital point Benji is making about strengthening Jewish identity through joy and positivity. Benji makes a very compelling case as to why centering Jewish education and anti-Semitism education around the Holocaust is a huge failure, both to Jews and non-Jews. There are still two things or areas I'd want to explore with Benji if he ever wants to come back on the show. First, I really want to dig deeper into how he went from being Orthodox to atheist. And secondly, I want to understand his sobriety journey a bit better. We'll touch briefly on both in the episode, but I still have more questions, which I'm excited to ask. Benji is a wonderful example of what it looks like to step up in your community in times of crisis. I love what he's created with the Storied Show. I think it really raises the bar for Jewish live entertainment, and I'm glad you'll get the chance to hear this conversation. Please enjoy this episode. Hi, Benji. Welcome to People Jew Wanna Know podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm glad I'm here too.
I'm very excited to chat. You're one of my favorite people that I've met through this whole like Jewish influencer social media space. And finally, we get to have a conversation. Without further ado, tell us about yourself. What do you do and how did you get there?
Well, first off, I don't think I'm a Jewish influencer. I'm a guy who has put some things together and done some interesting things, but I really think I'm just out there trying to spread a positive message and share information and exploring things that I'm passionate about and trying to put that in a way that people can digest it, because I wear a lot of hats, and I think that those hats are important for other people to have being visible. And so I try to make them as visible for people as possible. So, but to answer your question, who am I and what do I do? I'm a husband. I'm a dad. I've got two girls, two teenagers. One of those has special needs. Ella, who's 15. No, she'll be 15. When this podcast comes out, she'll be 15. And she has Coffin-Cyrus syndrome, which is a genetic mutation that causes structural defects in the body. And then she also has agenesis of the corpus callosum, which is the main bridge between the right and the left side of the brain is missing. She has all the neurons and the fibers, just that bridge is missing. That causes all sorts of complication. And she's got a couple of other issues, but those are the two main. Then my older daughter, Nama, who's 16 and just amazing. She's an amazing kid. I'm a commercial real estate broker by trade. That's how I feed my family. I'm a mediocre at best musician. That's not really where I spend my time, but you can see my background. I love playing guitar and bass and ukulele, and I have a lot of passion around music, and we'll get to that part as well. I'm an atheist. I tend to surprise people. I've got one of my best friends is a Chabad rabbi who refers to me as the frommest atheist he's ever met. And, I'm sure we'll talk about that as well. I'm in recovery, and I do a lot of work around the music recovery scene, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be involved in that community. So I do a lot of things, and, It's a good thing I don't need a ton of sleep.
Where do we begin? Look,
Whatever you want. You're in charge.
you've said to me before offline that all these different things that you do, they kind of converge. How do they converge?
How do they converge? I think that they converge in the idea that most people's Instagram or Facebook profiles are snapshots in an unrealistic perfection. And it's just not reality, right? Leonard Cohen said the cracks are where the light gets in, right? The idea that we live in this world of perfection is just non-existent. It's false. My world and the hats and the places where these converge is really the understanding that the imperfections are part of the beauty, and the imperfections are part of the uniqueness, and the imperfections are strengths, right? They're the things that make us who we are. And so, there are people who would say, why would you talk about recovery in public? Well, because recovery is the backside of addiction, and addiction is hard, and addiction is complex, and addiction is unpleasant. Recovery is the strength to get through it. I survived, and I'm here. Special needs parenting. It's hard. It's complicated, but my mom used to say a normal person is just somebody that you don't know very well, right? The idea that we're all dealing with stuff. Why do we have to pretend that we're not? We're all dealing with stuff. We all have special and unique circumstances in life and education and navigating the world. Let's talk about how to do that, because we can learn a lot from each other. And the same is true with religion, with an atheist being friends with a Chabad rabbi. Like there's some unique spiritual opportunities there that also overlap with recovery, that also overlap with music, that also overlap with special needs parenting. I mean, these are all, that's how they converge. It's the idea that the differences are not things that should separate us. The differences are the way that we can embrace each other's uniqueness.
Out of all the guests that I've had, you might be the first that I'm aware of that is like openly saying I'm an atheist, and at the same time, proudly Jewish. Talk to me about how you came to that conclusion.
Oh man. Happy to. There's a massive caveat before I talk about atheism with anybody, and that is I'm not trying to convince you to be an atheist. And if you believe in God, I'm happy for you. Do it. Whatever that God is, whatever religion that is, I'm happy for you. It's kind of like the Matrix. I unplugged from the Matrix, and if you're happy in the Matrix, do it. I'm not trying to convince you to get out of the Matrix. So my father was an Orthodox rabbi. My mother was the Rebbitzin that people expected. I went to a black hat yeshiva, my entire education. And I was in 10th grade, and we were in Shir in class with this rabbi who was talking about, Torah subjects. And he was talking about the story of Ezra, the scribe, and how as they left Babylon, and not as they left Babylon, as they left Israel and went to Babylon, he recorded a lot, and put things down. And as we're learning these subjects and going through and, talking about these stories, and he says, the difference between the Sephardi Sefer Torah and the Ashkenazi Sefer Torah is minimal. And I said, well, the exterior, like the exoskeleton on the Sephardi Sefer Torah versus the scrolls and the velvet, velour on the Ashkenazi, like that's not a difference in the Torah. That's a difference in the housing. And he explained to me that there's 7 letters different in the Sephardi Sefer Torah than there are in the Ashkenazi Sefer Torah. And I was like, hold on a second. What do you mean there's 7 differences? And he says, they're nominal. They're irrelevant. It doesn't change the meaning of the word. It's an extra vav or an ayin or an aleph. They're irrelevant. And I said, but you believe that this is the word of God. And it was like this light bulb moment. And he goes, you believe that's the word of God? And he said, of course. And I said, okay, then are Sephardim wrong? And he goes, no, they're not wrong. It's just slightly different. I said, well, Sephardim believe that their Torah is the word of God, right? He said, yeah. I said, then Ashkenazim are wrong. He said, no, we're not wrong. It's just a slight variation. I said, either we have a word of God or we don't have a word of God. But you can't tell me that this document is the word of God with 7 letters different than this document with the word of God. And he said, no, you don't understand. There's whatever the number is, 15,000 letters and, whatever, it's so many thousands of words. And there's only 7 differences. It's nominal. It's irrelevant. I said, it's irrelevant if you were talking about the Constitution, right? It's irrelevant if you're talking about a legal document. But you're talking about the word of God. So if it's the word of God, it's either is or it isn't. And he basically said, you're reading into something. I mean, he dismissed it as nonsense. And what I came to the realization in that moment, and I sort of stop sometimes and unpack this and re-examine it, I always come back to the same conclusion. We have a beautiful and rich tradition. We have a beautiful and rich history. We have a beautiful and rich culture. All of those things should be celebrated and all of those things should be embraced. But we have folklore and we have stories and we have information that is taught to children as literal. And then those children grow up believing that it's literal. And then they teach their children that it's literal. So when we talk about the flood and Noah and the ark, that was an old man, and there was the story, and there was there's a parable there that happened. It's sort of like, the idea of latkes and sufganiot and dreidels, right? These are folklore and parables that turn into, there were Jews in caves hiding from Greeks, spinning dreidels and eating latkes. No, there weren't. This is how the story evolved, and it's beautiful, and that's our culture. But that's not literal. That's folklore, and folklore is an important part of culture. And when I realized that, I realized we have folklore, Christians have folklore, Muslims have folklore, Buddhists have folklore, right? Would you ever say that the Native American gods are wrong and therefore Native American culture shouldn't exist and people shouldn't celebrate? No, that's a beautiful, rich culture that needs to be preserved. Otherwise it'll go away, and we don't want it to go away, right? I don't believe in 7-armed gods and purple with elephant tusks. I don't believe that that's real. I believe that the culture is beautiful and important and needs to be preserved, and they should teach it to their children, and their children should teach it to their children, just like I teach Judaism to my children. But I also don't believe that folklore is literal.
This is so interesting to me because the stories we tell about our history or culture, that to me is a separate issue from God. I talked about this on another episode that I did, where I was reading this essay written by one rabbi, I think in the 60s. And it was a question he was answering about, is God dead? And how do we make sense of all the things that are commanded onto us, right, as Jewish people? And he said, well, according to the Torah, only one of the commandments by the Jewish people on Mount Sinai were heard directly from God. Everything else God said to Moses. And that one commandment was, there is one God, don't pray to idols. Everything else was said by Moses. Everything else was kind of interpreted by humans. It was human to human. And that to me is a very comforting thought, because as someone who considers myself a secular Jew, and people are like, well, if you want to be Jewish, why don't you keep kosher or keep Shabbat? And those things to me are not so important. It's really the belief, is there a God, and does that God govern, the world that be? And what is my community, and what are the stories my community tells me? And are those stories the stories I want to live by and the values that I want to uphold? And so those to me are two separate yes questions.
So I have good news for you. The only people that believe that you have to keep kosher in order to practice Jewish life are people who keep kosher, right? And again, I'm not disparaging the Orthodox community, but the Orthodox community has a belief system. And in that belief system, these are the things that you have to do. And when you don't do them, you're a good person, but you're a wrong person, right? You're wrong for not doing that. And so there's this belief that you have, but there's a lot of us who don't believe that. So I don't believe that I have to keep kosher, but I don't, therefore I'm wrong and I'm just living wrong. I believe that there are people who are choosing to keep kosher, and that's great. And there's people who choose to not keep kosher. That's we're speaking a different language there.
As I think back on all of the things you do and the life experiences you've had, the thing that kind of like shocks me and amazes me is how throughout the course of your life, be it God or the universe or just, random chance, you've been handed all of these uniquely peculiar kind of opportunities. And some of them are really challenging. Going sober, raising a daughter with special needs, which you were probably not prepared for because no parent is ever quite prepared. Doing all these side hustles, side pursuits, living post October 7th as a Jewish person and becoming an advocate online. All of this is like, why Benji? Like, why is this all happening to Benji in all of these different facets of your life? What do you think as you reflect, what do you think you've learned or what has it taught you?
One of my least favorite things that people say when we talk about life is, God only gives you what you can handle. And my standard response to that is, your God is a terrible judge of character, right? I don't know why he thinks I can handle this, but okay, let's go with that premise. I think one of the biggest ones for me in learning how to navigate life with all these different hats is expectations and gratitude, right? So people often say, oh, it has to be hard to be a special needs parent because you expected this to happen and that's what actually happened. Or you have to be worried, is she ever going to start talking? Or is she going to be able to live independent? Or is she going to be? And I'm like, you realize parents of kids who don't have special needs have those same worries, right? Is my daughter going to grow up and go to college? Is she going to is she going to have good friends? Is she going to have good relationships? Is she going to get married? Is she going to have kids? Like all these questions that people wonder about having kids with special needs. You have those questions about your neurotypical kids. They're exasperated, right? They're more pronounced when your child has special needs. I try not to compare, right? Because comparing is never a good thing. But in the world of special needs, there are people who say, it's really hard. I had to rent my daughter an apartment and she's lives with a roommate or he lives with a roommate and, I have to check in on them. Right. And there are people who say my life's really hard with my kid because, they never got potty trained. They still wear a diaper and I have to wipe their butt. Right. That's difficult. And then there's people who say, my life's hard because I wish I had to worry about potty training. Like my kid is on a feeding tube, right? I can't feed them normal food. Like every meal comes with a medical procedure. If we're comparing, I love the expression, in a trauma contest, nobody wins, right? If we're comparing the difficultness of those, we're all going to be unhappy. And so for me, the reverse of that is gratitude, right? It's celebrating the wins. It's celebrating the joy. It's knowing that it's funny in my recovery world, I would talk about gratitude as an action word, right? And looking for the places where I can express my gratitude so that I can be content and happy. In Jewish terms, it's from Pirkei Avot, where they say, Ezehu Ashir Hasamech V'Chalko. Who's a happy person? Somebody who's satisfied with what he has. That's gratitude, right? And so if we can eliminate the expectations, again, let's use recovery terminology. Expectations are resentments in training, right? If I can get rid of the expectations of what I think that you should be doing, or I think that God should be doing, or I think that the world should be doing, or my spouse or my kids, right? If I can eliminate the expectations and focus on the gratitude of what is working and what I do have, my life becomes very simple, right? My job is to put my next foot forward and do the work. And if I don't have gratitude and I'm sitting in my expectations of what I think should happen, right? Why don't I have more of that? Why didn't that happen? Why didn't this deal close? I can find endless reasons to be unhappy.
It's crazy to me to hear you talk about this way because for better or for worse, it almost sounds like your recovery journey positioned you for success with raising your daughter, because a lot of the skills that you learned in recovery are then directly applicable to being a parent to someone who has special needs. Is there any myth about special needs parenting that you want to bust?
Yeah. So I'm going to share this story with you that is relevant to what you just said, and I think will answer your question. So I was speaking at a conference in the special needs community, and I was sharing stuff along the similar lines. I do a lot of public speaking about nonverbal communication, and my daughter Ella we actually gave a TED talk, and forgive me, there's no way to say that without sounding pretentious. I'm just framing that, I do public speaking.
We actually give a TED talk.
Me and my nonverbal daughter gave a TED talk on nonverbal communication.
And it was amazing, by the way. I watched it start to finish and I cried at the end, but please continue.
Thank you. The idea of the TED Talk was how we used music to create a language and enhance her nonverbal communication. And she used music videos to create this language, and it was our job to figure it out. So I was speaking at this conference, and one of the things that I said was, it's our kids' jobs to live their lives and figure out how to live life, right? It's our jobs to help them in doing that. It's not our jobs to enforce or to impose our expectations on our kids. And so if these are the tools that your kid has, focus on those tools and stop trying to create them doing something else. And the example that I used was a friend of mine who has a daughter who has autism, and in her IEP, they said, we're taking eye contact with speaking off of her IEP. And I said to my friend, wait a second, she's 18 years old, and for the last 15 years on the IEP, let me pause for a second. An IEP is a program in the school system where they talk about specific goals and milestones for kids who have learning differences or special needs. And so the IEP is how we approach the classroom collaboratively between the parents, the school system, teachers, and the kids. So I'm just clarifying for anybody who's not familiar with that terminology. So I said, for the last 15 years on her IEP, it had help this kid make eye contact with speaking. That's like trying to teach a fish to climb a tree, right? Like, why is that the goal? And he looked at me and he was like, I'm devastated that we just figured this out. Like what, and I said, our job is to figure out what are goals that we can accomplish and get them. Now, I'm not saying don't only do the easy work. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if something is unattainable, don't impose that, right? Focus on what is attainable and focus on what you can do to live a good life. And a number of parents came over to me afterwards and we're like, you just changed the way that we're approaching our kids, because we've been so frustrated with my kid can't do X. And now this realization that my job is to figure out what can we do, and let's lean into those strengths, remove the expectations, focus on the gratitude. It's life-changing.
Well, I think the myth there is that the aspiration should not be, let's make this child act like other children or give them skills that you typically see in kids, but rather what is realistic for my child and how can I give them the best quality of life with the natural strengths that they already show me that they have that I can develop. And it kind of reminds me, in the summer, I listened to an episode that Barry Weiss had on her Free Press podcast, honestly. And she had this news anchor who has autism. And when he was growing up, one of his eyes was crossed and he had to fix that. He was nonverbal for the first few years of his life. But then his father, became a stay-at-home dad and worked with him on how to become quote unquote normal, right? How to become like other people in society, neurotypical people. And for many years, this guy obviously became very successful, a news anchor on TV. For many years, people didn't even realize he was autistic. Like, they would talk to him and feel like he was a little bit off, but they really did not realize that he had, a severe form of autism. And in the episode, he talked about what his dad did. And although you might look at this and say, well, that shouldn't have been the goal, right? To make him like everybody else. The interesting thing is the tools that his father trained him were kind of similar. For example, Barry asked him, how did you learn to speak to people normally? Or like, develop EQ, which is something that people struggle with. And he said, well, when I was young, my dad would take me out to lunch with his colleagues. And the first couple of times I went, if somebody said something really interesting, I would like ask a million questions, and it was really uncomfortable for everybody else. I like dominated the conversation. My father felt out of place. So one day my father sat me down after the lunch and said, why did you feel like you should have asked those questions? Or like, why do you think you can take up so much of somebody's time? And he slowly chipped away at this notion that I had that, I could just ask and ask and ask and go down my rabbit hole. And he taught me that, sometimes it's good to let others speak. And he made a little cue for me that when he felt that I was speaking too much at lunch, he would tap on his watch like this. So nobody would notice it, but his father would tap on his watch to say enough. And that's how I learned over time that enough hit after 2 questions. So I roughly know I have 2 questions before somebody gets annoyed with me. And those were the kinds of cues. And although it's like kind of ingenious when I listen to it, a part of me also struggles to accept that that was the methodology that his father used to kind of like Pavlovian condition his son into becoming more neurotypical, which is, it's hard, it's painful. And I see the admiration this news anchor has for his father and the gratitude he feels to his father because the skills he learned allowed him to become a famous news anchor on TV. But ultimately, I'm sure it's kind of like his father probably never accepted him exactly the way that he was. He accepted him for the potential that he could have.
Yeah. So you're, getting right to the heart of the matter of raising kids. And that is, this guy's parent had never raised a special needs kid before, had no idea what he was doing. And unlike me, didn't grow up in a time or didn't start raising a kid in a time where there were tools and resources and support and conversations about this. So he was figuring it out. And it sounds like he was doing the best that he could. He wasn't shutting him out and saying, whatever, I've got a weird kid. He was trying to help him with some guardrails, with some bumpers, if you will, on how to have conversations. And there are plenty of people who have said, I've got a weird kid, I'm not bringing my kid to lunch, I'm not bringing my kid around others, right? That's not what his dad did. What his dad did was say, let me help you learn. And that's leaning into strengths, right? That's taking advantage of the opportunity to not only do that, but then he chose a career where his job was to ask people questions, right? Like how incredible is that? I think about a friend of mine who has since passed away, but he was an adult with Asperger's who was high functioning and in the business world. And he used to ask questions, and he would start with, forgive me, I have Asperger's. If I make you uncomfortable, just say that's enough and you won't hurt my feelings, but I will ask you questions until you're uncomfortable. So if at any point in time you want to be done, just let me know and I promise you won't hurt my feelings. And it was disarming because he knew his strength, his curiosity. He knew his weakness, not knowing when to stop. And very much like the person that you're talking about, he set his guardrails differently, right? He just gave people permission to cut him off, but leaning into those strengths and weaknesses. Imagine if all of us did that, right? Imagine if we started a conversation and I said to you, hey, Margarita, I think that I'm funny, but very often people don't find my humor funny. They find it off-putting. So if I say something that makes you uncomfortable, just tell me to pound sand. Right? Like, I never say that to people starting a conversation, but I probably should, because sometimes I make jokes that people are like, that was dumb, he shouldn't have said that. Right? Like, I actually think that these are very healthy and encouraging stories.
The way you've helped Ella learn to communicate through music is like nothing short of incredible in my eyes. And how she's developed rhythm and emotion, showing emotion through the music that she hears is amazing. And also, I think, connects to the work that you do on the Storied Show. So I want you to tell me a little bit about Storied. How did it come about? What is your goal with it? And any highlights you want to share? I mean, the concert that you did with Matisiahu was iconic.
Thank you. Hopefully it's the first of many. Yeah, so Storied is a program that I started shortly after October 7th. It was sort of a partnership brainchild of a conversation that I had with the folks here at the JCC here in Detroit, at the Berman Theater. The big picture idea is my father, again, this Orthodox rabbi, used to say that the two biggest problems for Jewish continuity are, one, the idea of Holocaust education being a primary focus of Jewish identity, and two, the Yiddish expression "Schwer zu sein a Yid," which means it's hard to be Jewish, which was like an old European sort of Tevye coming to America conversation. And his reasoning was, if the things that we tell our children, the messaging that they receive is it's hard to be Jewish and then they're coming for us, why would they stick around? Right? They're not. And so we have to focus on the positive stuff. We have to focus on positive messaging, positive stories, positive narratives. October 7th combined those two problems and amplified them. We realized it's hard to be Jewish in Israel. It's hard to be Jewish in America. We realized that on October 7th, they showed us exactly how they planned to take Jews out of Israel. They showed us how they plan on implementing from the river to the sea. And they showed us in America how unsafe we actually were. Hopefully this is no longer an issue by the time this episode comes out. But this week alone at the Chabad at Michigan State University, somebody threw a brick at the window and damaged the window, and then came back the next night and spray painted a swastika on the building and wrote "He's back" and spray. My biggest concern is not the Chabad house. Chabad is going to be fine. Like, they were built for this. The Chabad, they're unbelievable. There's no glory or wealth or fame that comes with becoming a campus Chabad rabbi. The campus Chabad rabbi's job is to inspire our children, right? My biggest concern is that kids going to MSU are going to say, I probably shouldn't go to Chabad anymore. It's not safe. And if that happens, we have a big problem. It's our job to make sure that those kids are engaged enough to know that they can be Jewish, they can be proud of their Judaism, they can be engaged in Jewish community, they can be involved. Now, I wish I had the resources or the ability to snap my fingers and say, kids on the Michigan State University campus, you're safe and this is a good place for you to be. I got to figure out how to do that. I don't know the answer to that, but I came up with Storied. And in Storied, we tell positive Jewish stories of where Jews in the Jewish community collaborated or contributed to a band or genre. The first show we did was in April of 24. We talked about the Beatles. That's the sweatshirt that I'm wearing right now, this Jewish contribution to the Beatles. And people said, oh, so you're going to do, the Brian Epstein story. And I said, yeah, Brian Epstein's one of 14 stories in this show. And people are like, there's 13 other stories. And the answer is, yeah, there's some really amazing Jews who contributed and collaborated with the Beatles and really made the Beatles as special as they were. And so we did that show. It was very successful. People loved it and immediately were like, what's next? And so I wrote a second script. And the format is kind of like VH1 Storytellers meets MTV Unplugged. So I tell a story on stage, 3 to 5 minutes, and then the band plays a song. And I tell another story, the band plays a song. So it's 14 story, then songs. People loved it. Do more. The second show we did was about grunge. And people were like, what, what is, I love grunge. I grew up in the 90s, that was very important music to me. So we did 2 sets. The first set was Jews who contributed to the scene, guys like Rick Rubin, Sarah Silver, who was a businesswoman who helped Nirvana and Alice in Chains, and just really incredible woman. She wasn't part of the music; she was contributing and collaborating. And then there was the Jews in the scene. Adam Duritz from the Counting Crows, Hillel Slovak from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and actually there's 2 other Jews who played in the Chili Peppers. Chris Cornell, whose grandmother was Jewish, so going through these Jews who collaborated and Jews who were in the bands. The third show we did was about the Grateful Dead, and that was a circus. That was absolutely wonderful. And then the most recent show we did was about reggae, and that was with Matisyahu, where we looked at both the Jews in the scene who collaborated, but we really had a heavy focus in that scene on the Jewish content inside the music. So where did Rastafarianism draw from the same well as Judaism, and what liturgy and biblical stories and biblical themes and actual texts did they use in the music? One of the lines that I said was the song Rivers of Babylon, which was a reggae song that was then done by Sublime. And I'm like, much to the chagrin of white kids in the suburbs in the 90s, Bradley Knoll from Sublime didn't write that song, but neither did the reggae community. That was King David. That's straight from Psalms. And so really exploring that and leaning into that. And I'm in the middle of writing our 5th script, which is called the Her Story Sessions. It's Jewish women's contribution to music. So looking at everybody from Carole King, both as a singer, but also as a songwriter and contributor to other people's music, Barbara Streisand and Idina Menzel and Pink and Amy Winehouse and lots of people in between, and really trying to focus on stories that young people will be engaged in. And then, through this process, a lot of people said to me, your stories are great. I don't know, can I curse on this? So people said, the show is great, but you fit 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. Like, I can't absorb all that information so quickly. I need more. And so we started a podcast. We just wrapped up season 1 of Storied. So it was 14 episodes talking about the Beatles. Each episode was a story. We had some really amazing guests. We had Brett Burns, who's the son of Burt Burns, who wrote the song Twist and Shout. He also wrote Cry Baby and Piece of My Heart for Janis Joplin. He also wrote Hang On Sloopy. He also found and really built Van Morrison and Neil Diamond. I mean, he was incredible. We had Jonah Platt, who's a Beatles super fan and really was able to talk about the filmmaking of the Beatles. And we talked to Andy Buckley, and we talked to Judy Gold, and we talked to Hallel Silverman, and just, it was an awesome season. If you're a Beatles fan and like Jewish content, I'm really proud of the product that we put out. And we're now gearing up to do season 2.
What's in store for season 2 on the podcast?
So we're going to do grunge.
Okay, you're following the plot of the show.
Sequential order. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got to get David Draymond on. That's like grunge adjacent? ?
So David Draymond's mentioned in the show, and he's part of the beginning of the show is, Neil Young being sort of the godfather of grunge, and then this evolution of 60s, 70s rock, punk, metal, and you put those 3 together and that, or those 4 things together, and you have grunge. And so David Disturbed is mentioned in that.
He's still, to this day, one of my dream guests because he's a cantor by education, which I don't think is like a well-known fact about him. And I am just so intrigued how a cantor went into being a thrash metalist singer.
What he and I have in common is he's also a recovered yeshiva guy.
Oh, I thought you were going to say bold, bald, beautiful or something like that.
Yes, that too. So
2 bald baddies.
Yeah. there's many things that we have in common, but we're both recovered yeshiva guys.
That's amazing. I'm really looking forward to your next season. Tell me, as you reflect, we kind of covered, 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag today in this episode too, going from sobriety to raising kids to music, touching a little bit on your activism work. What do you think your message is to the Jewish people?
Let me just back up by saying I don't consider myself an activist. Oh, that's not true. I am an activist. I don't consider myself an influencer. I am an activist. Prior to October 7th, my social media and online presence was real estate, special needs, music recovery. Okay. I never talked about Jewish life. I never talked about Israel. It just wasn't what I was doing. My background didn't have a Star of David, or the Israeli flag. I never wore a Magen David necklace, none of that. After October 7th, I found friends, people that I broke bread with, people that I shared Airbnbs with on fish tour, people that I knew personally, changing their profile pictures to paragliders with Palestinian flags. And I said, what are you doing? What is that? And their response was either you're a bloodthirsty warmonger, which couldn't be further from the truth. I was a bleeding heart liberal that was, shocked. Or it was, don't worry, Benji, you're one of the good ones. We only want the Zionists. And I was like, oh, motherfucker, I am not one of the good ones. That is that is not me. And so in this music scene, in this recovery scene, in this special needs community scene, I found myself feeling like I don't understand why these liberal communities that I didn't just support, I was active in, I was part of, I was there for them. I was part of them. And they were cheering the rape and murder of my family, the kidnap of my family. And so I posted a handful of videos to say, this is what's actually going on, right? When you say it's an atrocity that Israel cut off the water supply to Gaza on October 8th, number one, Israel only supplied, I don't remember the number, 12% of Gaza's water. So they didn't cut off all of the supply. They cut off the free water that Gaza was getting. And B, why should we be giving free water to somebody we don't even know how many hostages they're holding because we haven't finished counting our dead and we haven't finished figuring out where everybody is. And those were the types of videos that I was posting. And every time I posted, I got questions like, I don't understand. You're saying that you're a Zionist, but Zionists are racists, and I know you, and I know that you're not a racist. Can you explain how you as a liberal are saying that you're a Zionist? And I said, I'm happy to answer that question, but I'm not going to do it in a DM. I'm taking a screenshot of your question, and I'm making a video so that all of our friends can see. Not putting on blast. I want them to all see that answer. So a lot of questions, a lot of answers. Then I started getting DMs like, hey, my daughter is at college and she's asking me these questions and I don't know how to answer. Can you answer these 3 questions? And I said, absolutely. But rather than just answering them in a DM, I'm going to answer this for everybody to see. And that really became how I was posting videos. It was a feature of answering questions to my organic community. And that picked up steam. People shared and people asked more questions. And then, it sort of took on a life of its own. The night that, and all I did was post videos. The night that Hirsch and the Beautiful Six were found murdered by Hamas in the tunnel, I could not bring myself to make a video. And so I took out my iPhone and I wrote a note and I posted that and shared how I felt. That was shared countless times. It was seen millions of times. People took it and reposted it on there. Went viral. And I didn't know enough at the time to have a watermark with my name on it. So, and that's not the purpose. But at that moment I realized, I don't have to only make videos. I can do some words as well. And so I started making carousels at the time, since then. And, my message to the Jewish community is very simple. And I actually made a shirt, and I wear the shirt often. And that is empowered Jews empower Jews. My grandfather empowered me with a lot of information and with a lot of strength and with a lot of Jewish pride. And I feel compelled to share that with other people who may not have access to that. Other than about 25 of us, nobody else in this world got to grow up with my grandfather. And I feel very privileged that my Zaidi was my Zaidi, and I got the access to him that I did. And so when I'm empowered with a piece of information, when I'm empowered with a feeling, when I'm empowered with anything, I think that it's my job to make sure that you have it too. If you don't want it, you don't need to take it, but giving you access to it is important to me. And so that's my message to the community. If you were empowered by something, share it. If you felt good because you read something or you saw something, share it. Don't keep it to yourself. There are too few of us, and many of us are scared for our jobs or for our safety or for our community or for any countless reasons that people don't want to put things out there. You don't have to put things out there. Like, comment, share, amplify, empower other people with what you've been empowered by.
Benjamin Franklin had a wonderful quote on that. It was like, hide not your talents, for use they were made. What's a sundial in the shade?
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Benjamin Franklin is amazing as a character of history. I wish he was a Jew. That would have been iconic. Anyway,
He would have been like Benjamin Feinbush or something like
that. Yeah. Tell me, how can people connect with you and learn more about your work?
I'm pretty easy to find. Benji Rosenzweig on Instagram or on LinkedIn or on Facebook. You can also find Storied on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. We're putting a lot of content out there. Again, just trying to empower people with positive Jewish narrative, with good information, and with things that they feel good about. So, I think the big one for us is we're trying to bring storied shows to other communities. We're working on a number of small tours around the country to bring storied shows out there. And there's something I got to share. On this subject specifically. So we at the Matisyahu show, I announced that we were doing this women's show in March, and the principal of one of the Jewish schools here in Detroit said, we have a Zman Kodesh class at the school. Zman Kodesh is a non-text based Jewish culture class. And it's an elective, and you have to pick one of 3 or 4 electives. And so he said, we have a Zman Kodesh class right now that is a group of smart and engaged girls, high school girls. And they asked for a class on Jewish women and culture. Would you come in and be a guest lecturer and do some of your storied stories for this class? And I was like, absolutely. So I went into the class and I talked about Carole King, Amy Winehouse, and Carole King being a Jewish contributor, Amy Winehouse being a Jewish singer. And then for the Jewish content, I talked about Bob Dylan's song, Shelter from the Storm, and all the Jewish women in these biblical references in this song. That went real well, and the kids had a good time. So they actually asked me to write a curriculum that they can teach over 18 weeks. And so I'm in the middle of writing the curriculum that we're going to be teaching at this school, and then taking it to hopefully schools, Jewish schools across America, teaching empowering Jewish positive stories in the music space. So there's lots more to talk about, but that's the headline there.
That's super exciting. And I hope that you can teach the curriculum and expand it to other schools once this first pilot goes well. Thank you so much for doing this. I have one final question for you. It's one that I ask every guest. Who would you like to nominate for People Jew Want to Know?
Well, because I don't do anything simply, I've got 2. Number one is I want to nominate my friend Andy Buckley, who is just a wonderful, wonderful advocate for the Jewish community. as well as David Draymond. So we're going to have to get him on here too.
David Draymond is an impossible get, but I will keep trying. I sent him the most amazing invitation email where I made 7 puns of his different song titles. And at the end I wrote, please don't leave me in the sound of silence and let me know if you would like to be a guest. Anyway, thank you very much, Benji. This was delightful. I'm so grateful for the conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please go ahead and rate us 5 stars. Be the first to hear our episodes by subscribing to People Jew Want to Know wherever you get your podcasts. And for exclusive content, follow us on Instagram at People Jew Want to Know.